This is Jessica Lilly, and I'm interviewing my grandmother, Mrs. A.W. Thompson Sr., in her home on January 21st, 1986. Go ahead.
I am Norma Thompson and was born August 11, 1915, during a summer hurricane. I was born 8 miles north of Katy, Texas, in a farmhouse of my parents. My 3 older sisters were quite happy to have a baby sister to play with. When I was 2 years old, I had a baby brother come to my house. I messed it up.
It's okay, go ahead.
As the 2 of us grew up, we were very close and did just everything together. I even let him wear my hair bows and my dresses. When I was 6 years old and was going to school, he was only 4. And we played a lot in the chinaberry tree at the back of the house. We had ropes tied to the limbs and pulled buckets up and down the limbs, up and down to the tree, and had a lot of fun. Sometimes we put rocks or marbles in these buckets. We played a lot with marbles and had a dozen or more of each. And our pet puppy was Spot. And of course we had a lot of kittens to play with. They were some of our best toys, you might say. Many times we rode the dog and the kittens in our red wagon and had much fun together. When I was 6 and he was 4, our country schoolhouse was a half a mile from our home. I attended school at the Stockdale School with my sisters. When I started school, I would teach my brother, W.C., all the words I had learned at school, so he could read just as good as I could, even though he'd never been to school. W.C. and I climbed up on the large wooden gate down by the barn to watch the pretty clouds, as we called them, called the beautiful sunsets. We also played mumble peg with 3-bladed knife. Of course, we spent lots of time looking at the funny papers in the daily newspaper. Our school in the country only had 1 teacher and only about 15 pupils. When I was 11 years old, our family moved to Katy, to town, so as we called it, so that my older sisters could continue their education. I was in the 5th grade, and there were many adjustments to be made, but our family adjusted to them all quite well. We had the usual childhood diseases, all my brothers and sisters, chicken pox and measles and whooping cough and all those things. All through school, I was considered a good student and loved all my teachers, both in grammar school and in high school. I went to County Meet, which is much like the Interscholastic League now, representing the Katy School in spelling. I did this several years. This was thought to be quite an honor and something to be very proud of. All through high school, I was a regular member of the church choir and rendered many solos. I also was very active in our young people's meetings. I enjoyed my high school days and graduated May the 26th, 1932 from Katy High School as valedictorian of my class. I attended Baylor College at Belton, Texas, a woman's college. I only stayed there 3 months because I was so homesick for my family. I had never been away from home at all. When I returned home, I was my mother's helper with lots of cooking, cleaning, washing, and ironing, and helping care for my younger sisters and brother. When Norma Stockdick married Albert Thompson at the Katy Methodist Church, two of the prominent families of Katy were joined. Our wedding was attended by everyone in Katy. My husband and I have always been very proud of our three wonderful children, two of which live in Katy. We also have 6 grandchildren, 3 granddaughters, 3 grandsons, and 1 great-granddaughter. We have a happy group when all of us are together, making our own fun. There have been so many changes in the community and school systems since I was a girl. Classes are much larger now, and many more teachers. When I was a student there, we only had 15 or so pupils in each class in Katy High. With the exception of one year, the class of 1936, that had 30 students. We had no movies when I was a young person or places to go to have fun. So we had to make our own fun, and many times we gathered around the piano and just sang all the popular music and also hymns that we had learned to love through the years. It's been an interesting life. Now, what did I miss that you wanted to know?
Well, I'm just going to ask you just some more specific questions.
Okay.
Okay, first of all, what was your father's full name and your mother's full name?
My father was William Chester Stockdick, and my mother was Zeta Helen Morrison. And they came to Texas in about 1896 to Katy, where there were no streets, no roads, no fences, nothing, no school. They had to build everything. It was just a wide open prairie. Katy was.
Okay, so they came down with like their families then, and they probably met through school, or do you know how they met?
Probably a church.
Or a church.
A church.
Do you know which church there was then?
Well, the Methodist Church was built and organized about 1900, and my great-grandmother, or my grandmother I should say, was very active in helping get the church organized and built. There was the Methodist Church where it now stands on the same property, and the Baptist Church was where the Baptist Church is located now.
Okay, what did your father do for a living?
My father was a farmer. He raised all kinds of crops, and then in later years, he was a rice farmer.
Okay, where did y'all live?
We lived 8 miles north of Katy.
Okay. And how many brothers and sisters do you have? I forget.
I have 6 sisters. No, only 5 because I'm one of them. 5 sisters and 2 brothers. All but 1 are living.
Okay. Can you tell me something about your parents, like what kind of people they were? Were they strict or?
Yes, my parents were very strict when they were young people. They came to Katy when they were young people. And there was no entertainment, so they had to make their own. But we did have a gathering place that was close to the school. That is the country school I'm talking about. And they had dances there, and my parents would dance, but they never would allow us to dance. So none of my sisters or brothers, any of us, never learned to dance.
Did y'all have any special family traditions or customs or anything special that y'all did on holidays?
Well, almost every Sunday, some of our relatives came to visit us for the afternoon, or were invited at Thanksgiving and at Christmas to come to our home, where we shared our food. And I don't know that we exchanged gifts in those days, but we were together with especially my daddy's family. His brothers and sisters and all of us were together.
Well, what did the town look like? Do you remember?
When
you were, like, say, in elementary school or younger, or in school?
The old hotel that's in Katy now was there, and the little building that the Katy Beauty Shop is in, that building is very much as it was in those days. And my grandfather was a real estate dealer and had his office in the lower part of that building. And of course we had our churches, but not as they look now. You know, they were small frame buildings, painted white, and then there was the Apostolic Church. We had no Catholic church here at that time, but we had the Apostolic Church, and the Methodist Church, and the Baptist Church.
Okay. When you went to school, first of all, how did you get there, and what did you wear? Or when the clothing you did wear, did your mother make them for you?
Are you talking about when we lived in town or in the country?
Okay, now how old were you when you moved to town? About 5th grade, you said?
Yeah, 5th grade. 11, I think I decided.
Well, okay, before...
My mother made my clothes. And, in fact, we all learned to sew as we were growing up. And we loved to try and sew on the sewing machine. And I remember one time, this needle of the sewing machine went through my finger. And it made me just about sick, you know, and I went in there and laid down on the bed and had my hand out like this, and my sisters were just real ornery. They brought a pan and put under my hand, so as they poured water over my poor finger that had the needle stuck in it. I was so mad at my sisters. That's not going, is it now?
Mm-hmm. This is okay. Oh, this is good. Now, this is what I want. Well, how did it work? Y'all didn't have any electricity or anything, did you? Or?
Well, we had electricity, I guess when I was in about the 7th grade. Mm-hmm. And, of course, with electricity, we got a radio, and that was great fun, you know, to listen to things that were happening in a distance. Nobody understood how it worked, you know, but it was fun. And that became probably our most fun thing to do, to listen to the radio in those days.
Was it like a Houston station, or?
Yeah, I guess.
Did y'all ever even go to Houston?
Oh, yes, we went to Houston, and when I went to this county meet I was telling you about in Spelling, every time, that was held in Pasadena, and that was a long distance from here in those days because we didn't have fine cars that we have now. But every time, about the time we get to Houston, I'd get the nosebleed. And we'd have to stop at a filling station for me to wipe the blood off of my clothes maybe, or my nose, and since I had nosebleeds so much when I was growing up, I learned to carry one of my daddy's handkerchiefs in my purse so as I'd be a little more prepared if I got the nosebleed. Silly.
Okay, well, what was a typical day at school like?
Well, we had our regular classes. Now, in the 5th grade, we had a man teacher. Of course, I'd never had a man teacher before, and he was very strict with us, and I wasn't quite used to that either. And I remember we studied geography, and of course, I had my little friends, and when we got the report card, they all got a D, but I got a C. And so I felt sorry for them because they didn't get a better grade. So I went with them to the teacher to protest about it. And he had a real quick temper, and so he said, "Norma, just give me your card." So I immediately gave him the card, and he just marked out the C and gave me a D also. My heart was broken because I knew when I got home, my daddy was going to have a real fuss with me about a grade like that. But when I told him what happened, he understood, I guess, and believed me, because he said, well, he was proud of me that I took up with my friends, that I was sorry that they didn't get a good grade. But, and as the class period was over, like before lunchtime, we all had to march out of the room. And when the bell rang and it was time to come back in to our classes, we had to all line up at the back of the school and walk in. We couldn't walk until the teacher hit this bell. And then we all marched into the classroom and took our places at our seats. And you'd better not be late getting in the line to walk in, or we were reprimanded for it.
So, when y'all lived out in the country, did y'all have to walk to school?
Yes, we walked to school. It was only half a mile, but we walked. I presume that our parents took us probably when it was bad weather. But I have a lot of good memories of walking down that road. In fact, every time I go out there in the country and say, oh, this is where I used to walk to school when I was only a little girl. And it's, it makes you feel real strange to be back on the same, you might say, dirt as you walked in those days. And my mother always saved, if they had baked sweet potatoes for lunch, she always saved me sweet potato to eat when I got home from school, and she had kept it in what she called the warming oven to keep it nice and warm until I got home from school. I felt like I was a privileged character, for my mother to be that thoughtful. But I liked it,
So y'all took y'all's lunch to school?
Yes. And if we didn't like what was in our lunch, we traded it with a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And at school, we didn't have any lunchroom like they had in later years, but we just went outside and sat with our backs to the side of the schoolhouse and kind of sat in a row. But if we didn't like the sandwich that happened to be in our lunch, we'd trade it with somebody else. And then another thing, we didn't have lunch kits to carry either, and our lunches were wrapped up in newspaper. Well, this one girl that was older than I always brought her lunch on Monday wrapped up in the Sunday funny papers. And since she was older, we all gathered around while after we'd had our lunch, she read us the Cats and Jammer Kids, and she could talk all that Dutchy talk, and it was more fun. I have fond memories of her reading the funny paper more than I do of going to school in the country. It was great fun because it was different. you know.
Well, did you have any favorite subjects or a favorite teacher or anything?
Oh, yes, I always enjoyed spelling and reading. I never did care much for history.
Well, okay, then after school, on summer vacations, what would you do? Do you remember? Did the family used to go out, or was
No, we didn't have
the harvest time?
It was harvest time, so we couldn't go on any vacation. We might go to spend the night at, I remember going several times to spend the night at my cousin's house, who was older than I was, but, and I slept that night on a day bed in the living room, and before I went to bed, my uncle said, now if you don't wake up early enough in the morning, this bed is going to close up and catch you in it. And you know, I hardly slept all night because I was afraid that bed was going to, I believed him, and I thought the bed would close up and catch me in it, you know. But he was just fooling me all the time.
Will you tell me the story about the gun that y'all shot a hole in?
Oh, that was when my brother and I were about teenagers, I guess. Probably 13 and, well, probably 12 and 14. My parents had gone to Houston, and we were fooling around the house, I guess, and weren't doing what we should have done. We probably were left to clean the house and do some washing and things like that. But we went in our parents' bedroom, and in the closet was this gun. So we took it out of the gun, out of the closet, and my brother and I, and were just looking at it and fooling with it. And the first thing we knew, he had pulled the trigger and shot a hole through the floor in the closet of their bedroom. And my aunt lived right across the street from us, and she heard all that loud noise and came running over to the house, and she blessed us out. She told us all. We got a lot, we were reprimanded more probably than we were from our parents, but Aunt Catherine was so hard on us that day, and she told us that she didn't want us in that house all the rest of the day. We had to stay outside.
Oh, no. Well, you were saying that you're going to have to maybe clean the house. Did you have any specific chores that you had to do?
Well, I had so many sisters that every job that we did, there were two of us to do it. Like to wash the dishes, one washed and one dried. And if we're going to make up a bed, one was on one side and one on the other. And I had done that all my life until when I married. It was very strange to me to learn to make up a bed by myself and to do all these different jobs alone. It was because we'd always done everything in pairs.
What were birthdays like in your family?
Well, we always had a birthday cake and sang the happy birthday song, of course. And if we didn't have candles, my mother just put matches in the top of the cake, and we blew those out. And I'm sure I always got a doll for my birthday. And I remember, too, that I had a teddy bear that I really was very fond of. And to this day, I'm still very fond of stuffed teddy bears. And then I had a Cupid doll that was, pretty tall. And I really liked it very much, too. I wish I'd saved some of my dolls, though, for my grandchildren to see.
Let's see. What was your graduation ceremony like? Do you remember?
Well, yes. We had a school song that we sang. And since I was valedictorian, I had to give the valedictory address. And, of course, I worked for weeks on that to learn it very well, so as I wouldn't make any mistakes and use good expression and everything. And then the president of the school board passed out the diplomas as we walked across the stage to receive them. Of course, we didn't have caps and gowns, but we did all have new dresses, and the boys had new clothes for graduation. And it was quite a thing because, see, we didn't have much to do, so anything that was at the school, the public was invited. So everybody in town came to the graduation service, and I guess I should say, too, we had a separate graduation on Sunday morning. Not graduation, but the graduates were honored on Sunday morning at the service. And even though you belonged to another church, you all came to that particular church for the service. And then we had a reception after graduation. And this girlfriend and I kept saying, oh, we're never going to see each other again. We're never going to see each other again. And we just cried the whole time after graduation at the reception. And just about made ourselves sick. But to this day, we have never gotten together. And she lived in Houston a number of years, but our lives were so busy we never did get together. I still write to her about once a year, and she writes me. And she sent me a picture of she and her husband, and she looks very much like when we were in high school. So that's interesting to do.
You mentioned that you were really involved in youth activities at church. What types of things did y'all used to do?
Well, we had a room back of the fellowship, like the fellowship hall of the church part, that we kind of called our part of the church, where we had our services. And we had a president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer, and someone that was in charge of the program each week. And we had literature to follow, but we used our imagination for anything that we wanted to present. And we even took up our own offering, and we attended services, young people services down at First Methodist Church and some Methodist churches in Houston, like every month. We had probably more people involved in young people than they did at some of the larger churches, because we had no other.
There's nothing else to do.
Nothing else to do, kind of, yes.
Well, do you remember anything that was going on nationally or internationally at the time? Do you remember who was president or what was going on, or any stories?
I've thought about things like that, and I don't know if I just don't remember or if it wasn't important to me at the time. But I can't seem to remember who was president. I know I can look it up and see who was president, but I guess we lived in our own separate little world here in Katy, and we didn't worry about all the problems of the world. You know.
What year did you graduate?
1932.
1932. And were there any shops? Was Doobies around yet, or? Well,
my brother-in-law had the grocery store that was on the same spot as Doobies is now, and it was very much like any other grocery store. We had all the things, but I remember my mother would send me to the grocery store some, and there was a store in Katy that it was general store. You could buy fabric or buttons or pickles or most anything like that, dry goods and all, and food as well. But I, for some reason, was very afraid of that man. And every time you went in the store, he'd kind of crunch down and kind of like he was going to get you, you know. And even though I was 12 or 13 years old, I still had that feeling that I wasn't quite safe when I went in the store. So I'd get what my mother sent me to buy and get out of there in a hurry.
Did you buy your first loaf of bread there or something?
Probably, yes. The day we moved to Katy, see, my mother had always made homemade bread. And the day that we moved to town, she didn't make any bread that week because she was busy getting things ready to move, I guess. So one of my older sisters drove the car down the street to the grocery store that was right across where the cleaners is now. And we went in and bought sliced ham and store-bought bread, and I think some cookies and those good pickles that I love so much. But I can remember that day like it was yesterday. And that was, I thought, the best meal we ever had when we had that bread from the store and the ham and the pickles.
Mm.
So it was fun.
What were the dating customs when you were a teenager or whatever?
When we were young, my mother never would let me go on a date with a boy by myself. We always had to double date a lot of the time. But as time went on and I became older, I finally did get to go on a date by myself. But the first date I ever had with my husband-to-be, we went to an A&M football game. And a friend of mine went along with us. And I guess she thought she liked him better than I did, so she sat in the middle of the front seat next to him instead of letting me sit there. But it all worked out all right. I got him in the end.
Well, what did y'all do? Did y'all just stay around Katy for dates, or what? I mean,
yeah. Of course, some of these boys from Brookshire and Patterson, we dated them too.
Well,
that was.
How did you meet them?
At school. They came here to school.
Okay.
They didn't have any high school. They just had grammar school up there.
Oh, okay.
So they came to Katy School. And they didn't have a school bus to come on in those days. They all just got in somebody's car and took turns. One took the car one week, somebody else took the car the next week and all. But this girl I was saying that I graduated with, she was one of the girls from Brookshire.
Okay. How did you first meet Papa? Papa is her husband.
Well, of course, we went to school together, and he was in the class ahead of me, and there weren't many of the classes that we were together in, except in our, home room. Then we were all in the same room. But he never would pay attention to me, and I liked him, but he just wouldn't. I think he thought I was too young for him. Mm-hmm. He liked the girls that were in his class, and a lot of times we didn't go with boys that were not in our own class. In other words, you didn't go with an older boy. But it was quite different than today.
So did y'all start dating after you already graduated?
After I had gone off to college and he was up at A&M, we both came home at what we called midterm then, I don't know what they call it now, between semesters anyway. And there were no other girls in Katy. The other girls had gone somewhere else to live or were in college, and so he called me for a date. And I thought, at last, I'm going to get to go with him, And I guess we had fun on our first date.
So how long did y'all date before the love bug?
Well, let's see, from 32, I came home in 33. Would have been 33. It'd be 3 years till we got married, but we didn't date. I dated other people, too, and so did he. And, we took turns going either to the Baptist Church together or to the Methodist Church together. And,
You mean your daddy didn't throw a fit because you're going to Baptist church?
No, no. Just so I was going to church is the main thing. But, we had a lot of fun, even though it doesn't sound like it now, but we had a lot of fun.
Didn't you go to Houston sometimes and go out to eat?
Yes, I did after we were older and after Albert and I dated. We particularly liked to go to a show and then drive out South Main to what we called the pig stand. In fact, that's what it was named. And you could buy a barbecued beef sandwich. And we enjoyed that. And then there was another place that we went a lot that they sold this orange Julius. And it was orange Melba, they called it at that time. It was orange juice with ice cream, like. And those two things we really liked to do, and to just drive out Main Street and look at the buildings and the changes in things.
Did you get really dressed up? I mean,
yeah.
At that time, did you buy dresses or?
No, I made my own clothes.
Still?
And on this date that we went to A&M to the ball game, I had made a pretty blue dress. It was a lightweight woolen material and was trimmed and had large white buttons on it. I still have the buttons. And then I had made a white coat, a spring coat. And I got grease on my coat from his car. As I got in or out of the car, I got a lot of grease on my coat and ruined my coat. I never did get to wear it anymore because the cleaners ruined my coat. We didn't have professional cleaners then either. So it was, but I learned to sew, and in fact I have recently found a picture of this bluebird, like I learned to embroider when I was about 5 years old or 6. And I'd just give anything if I had. I embroidered those bluebirds on a pillowcase that fit my small individual pillow that I had. I didn't, my mama made me a small pillow. I always slept on that pillow until I married, I guess.
Well, do you remember what kind of like the size of the town was at that time?
Well, it was still pretty small, but I
mean, like, was there like the Baptist Church and the Methodist Church and the school, the store and the cleaners, and what else?
Well, that'd be about all.
Okay.
I guess a third or more of the buildings that are here now were there, at the time I graduated from high school.
Okay. How long were you and Papa engaged? Do you remember?
A year.
A year. Okay, what was the wedding like, and who all came? And
well, it was beautiful. In fact, one of my aunts said, "This is the prettiest wedding that Katy has seen up to now." But she says, when my daughter gets married, it's going to be even prettier than yours. And it was, because I sang at my cousin's wedding, and it was a lovely wedding. Well, we had, in those days, the ladies of the church or your relatives would borrow ferns, pretty plants from whoever owned them, and would fix them in tiers up where the couple would walk to be married. And my aunt had made silver bells that she joined and hung directly behind where we stood up on the platform at the church. And I carried well, let me tell you about my dress. I borrowed my sister-in-law's to be her veil, and I wore a white satin dress with a high neck and buttons all down the back and on the sleeves and long sleeves. And I carried white roses, long-stemmed white roses. And he wore a white woolen suit and white shirt, of course, and white shoes. And my oldest sister was my maid of honor, and his oldest brother was his best man. And then another one of my sisters was a bridesmaid and carried flowers. And his sister, one of his sisters, was a bridesmaid from his family. Mm-hmm. And
what did they wear?
They wore, my sister wore blue and his sister wore rose lace dresses that were floor length. And then we had flower girls, my little sister and his little niece, that carried baskets and threw down the rose petals in front of us as we came up to the altar. And then his brother and my brother were ushers, and two of his sisters sang a duet, and my aunt played the piano, and another aunt of mine, an aunt of mine sang in the duet, and a sister of his sang together in the duet. We had more music than you can imagine, and like I said before, everybody in town came to the wedding. We had I'm sure there was standing room only, but we had, that was just about like the fellowship hall is now, see, is where we married.
Well, did your mother make your dress?
No. I bought my dress at a shop on Main Street in Houston, and it had a little train in the back that was about this long. In those days we didn't have long trains like they have now, but it was, anyway, this much, this big, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, did you have a church reception afterwards?
We had the reception on the lawn over at my parents', and they had put lights outside, and we had tables for the cake and punch, and it was one of the hottest days that we've ever had in Katy, and my husband was just burning up in that woolen suit.
You had an afternoon wedding?
No, it was night.
It was a night? Oh, but it was still real.
Uh-huh.
Okay, where did y'all have a honeymoon?
Yes, we drove to Houston after the wedding, reception and all, and stayed at the Rice Hotel. And the next day we went out South Main into Rosenberg, and we'd been invited to come to Ruth and Lester's, my sister and her husband, for lunch that day, and I can remember very well what she served us. And then we drove on to Kerrville, and we stayed in a motel there, and we were only gone, I think, 3 days, and came back on Sunday. And as we came across from Hempstead across to Katy, there was a bridge out, and we got stuck in the mud and couldn't get our car to run, and he had to walk 5 miles to get help. And of course I was nervous, and I walked up and down the road and tried to find something to occupy my time. It was hot, and I waited, and I got thinking he's never coming back. But he did. He had to walk to his uncle's to get him to come bring the tractor and pull us out.